Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam.
Alhamdulillah nahmaduhu wa nasta'inuhu wa nastaghfiruhu wa na'udzu billahi min shururi anfusina wa min sayyiati a'malina man yahdihillahu fala mudilla lahu wa man yudlil fala hadiya lahu. Asyhadu an la ilaha illallah wa la syarika lahu wa asyhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluh la ilaha illallah amma ba'du. Alhamdulillah rabbil alamin. All praise and thank you to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for His mercy and blessing that we are all be able to come get together here in our masjid or masjid to attend the halaqah. This is part of IMC Siregar program. Alhamdulillah, today we have our General Consul of Indonesia, Omar Siregar, to be our guest speaker. So he will deliver something about Surah Yusuf, inshallah. So without further ado, I'd like to hand it over to Pak Panjang. Silakan, Pak.
Thank you.
Yeah, right.
Okay. There we go. Thank you, sir. Okay. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Alhamdulillah rabbil alamin wassalatu wassalamu ala asyrafil anbiya'i wal mursalin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Amma ba'du. Allah Ta'ala fi kitabil karim. A'udzu billahi minasy syaithanir rajim. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alif Lam Ra. Tilka ayatul kitabil mubin. Inna anzalnahu Qur'anan Arabiyyan la'allakum ta'qilun. نحن نقص عليك أحسن القصص بما أوحينا إليك هذا القرآن وإن كنت من قبله لمن الغافلين إذ قال يوسف لأبيه يا أبت إني رأيت 11 كوكبا والشمس والقمر رأيتهم لي ساجدين قال يا بني لا تقصص رؤياك على إخوتك فيكيدون لك كيدا إن الشيطان للإنسان عدو مبين وكذلك يجتبيك ربك ويعلمك من تأويل الأحاديث ويتم نعمته عليك وعلى آل يعقوب كما تمها على أبويك من قبل إبراهيم وإسحاق إن ربك عليم حكيم لقد كان في يوسف وإخوته آيات للسائلين إذ قالوا ليوسف وأخوه أحب إلى أبينا منا ونحن عصبة إن أبانا لفي ضلال مبين اقتلوا يوسف أو اطرحوه أرضا يخل لكم وجه أبيكم وتكونوا من بعده قوما صالحين قال قائل منهم لا تقتلوا يوسف وألقوه في غيابة الجب يلتقطه بعض السيارة إن كنتم فاعلين قالوا يا أبانا ما لك لا تأمن على يوسف وإنا له لناصحون أرسله معنا غدا يرتع ويلعب وإنا له لحافظون قال إني ليظنني أن تذهبوا به وأخاف أن يأكله الذئب وأنتم عنه غافلون قالوا لئن أكله الذئب ونحن عصبة إنا إذا لخاسرون فلما ذهبوا به وأجمعوا أن يجعلوه في غيابة الجب وأوحينا إليك لتنبئنهم بأمرهم هذا وهم لا يشعرون وجاءهم أباهم عشاء يبكون قالوا يا أبانا إنا ذهبنا نستبق وتركنا يوسف عند متاعنا وأكله الذئب وما أنت بمؤمن لنا ولو كنا صادقين وجاءوا على قميصه بدم كذب قال بل سولت لكم أنفسكم أمرا فصبر جميل والله المستعان على ما تصفون وجاءت سيارة فأرسلوا والدهم فأدلى دلوه قالوا يا بشرى هذا غلام وأصروا بضاعة والله عليم بما يعملون وشروه بثمن بخس دراهم معدودة وكانوا فيه من الزاهدين وقال الذي اشتراه من مصر لامرأته أكرمي مثواه عسى أن ينفعنا أو نتخذه ولدا وكذلك مكنا ليوسف في الأرض ولنعلمه من تأويل الأحاديث والله غالب على أمره ولكن أكثر الناس لا يعلمون ولما بلغ أشده آتيناه حكما وعلما وكذلك نجزي المحسنين وراودته التي هو في بيتها عن نفسه وغلقت الأبواب وقالت حيث لك قال معاذ الله إنه ربي أحسن مثواي إنه لا يفلح الظالمون ولقد حمت به وحم بها لولا أن رأى برهان ربه كذلك لنصرف عنه السوء والفحشاء إنه من عبادنا المخلصين واستبق الباب وقدت قميصه من دبر والف يا سيدها لدى الباب قالت ما جزاء من أراد بأهلك سوء إلا أن يسجن أو عذاب أليم قال هي راودتني عن نفسه وشهد شاهد من أهلها إن كان قميصه قد من قبل فصدقت وهو من الكاذبين وإن كان قميصه قد من دبر فكذبت وهو من الصادقين فلما رأى قميصه قد من دبر قال إنه من كيدكن إن كيدكن عظيم يوسف أعرض عن هذا واستغفري لذنبك إنك كنت من الخاطئين وقال نسوة في المدينة بالمدينة امرأة العزيز تراود فتاها عن نفسه قد شغفها حبا إن لنراها في ضلال مبين. My dearly beloved brothers, my Muslim sisters, Alhamdulillah, we are given the opportunity to meet again today, this afternoon, in this beautiful Masjid Istiqlal. Indeed, many of us can do many things on Friday afternoon, Friday night in some places, and yet we're here to come together to discuss something from the Quran. I took the time to read the Surah Yusuf first, so that we can go straight to the discussion, because at the end of the day, what I wish to share with you is a halaqah, a discussion about Surah Yusuf. Not to share with you my thoughts, but first of all for you to see the beauty of this surah. And what I will convey to you is only my perspectives as a diplomat, as an officer of the state, as the Consul General, as a modest Indonesian learning student. And as we know, the Quran is something that we will continue to learn and discover new things. And even if we dedicated our whole youth, our whole undergraduate or postgraduate, or even our careers, the Quran will always give us a blessing that we will always learn. One thing that I wish to share, especially because Surah Yusuf is not a surah that is uncommon. If you go to YouTube, you'll see many speakers that talk about Surah Yusuf, and subhanallah, we from Indonesia, or even from Australia, or from other parts of, even from India, Pakistan, all over the world, we see these great speakers that talk about Surah Yusuf. Nu'man Ali Khan, Omar Sulaiman, and even now Yasser Qadi, and it turns out, subhanallah, they're all in the state of Texas. So I think we are all very lucky that in this beautiful state of Texas in the US of A, we are still protected by Allah, reminded by Allah, and given a chance to always contemplate the Quran. And here we find ample speakers. My brothers, when we talk about Surah Yusuf, we also wish to learn the context of its surah. So in my presentation today, which I will conclude in 5 minutes because I look forward to the discussions, some things that I wish to convey. And firstly, Surah Yusuf is beautiful that we have to read it. That's why I spent the first 10 minutes reciting it in the best way that I could. I hope that not only all of us here will enjoy the beauty of Surah Yusuf, I know I enjoy it. It is said that for those who are sad, they should read the Surah Yusuf as much as possible. It is said that Surah Yusuf is the father of Quran. Some surah are the heart of the Quran, but Surah Yusuf is seen to be that. But more than that, there are many miracles in Surah Yusuf that we cannot possibly discuss within this short period of time. But before we do that, it is a story about father and son. It is a story about a young man who is given the biggest challenges, and it is a story of geopolitics where a person from Canaan can go to Egypt and create the greatest empire before it is brought down by Moses. Moses about 400 years later. So briefly as I go through this, let me share with you the context. We know that Surah Yusuf came in perhaps 2 years before Hijrah. So it is in a time of the year of sorrow. When our dearly beloved Prophet Muhammad at that time, after 8 years of preaching about Islam in Makkah, enough to say that Quraysh, once the Quraysh said, we will give you the son, we will give you all the wealth and all the power in this city if you would just allow us for us to become, to share our religion. And at that time, our beloved Prophet says, even if you put the sun on the left hand and the moon on the right hand, I will never abandon this religion. And at that moment, the Quraysh were so angry. And at that year, our dearly beloved Prophet, his wife, Siddiq Khadija, she passed away. And that wasn't long after his beloved uncle, Abu Talib, who protected him for so many years, for 8 years during his da'wah, he passed away. And as he tried to reach out to another city around near Makkah, he was at Taif. He was truly facing such harsh response because they started abusing him. And the following year or two, it became more difficult where it was obligatory to have hijrah. But at that time, if one remembers, that was a time where, with such a year of sorrow, the Sahaba started saying, "Can you give us a story to make us feel better?" At the same time, the Quraysh was not yielding. They wanted to find any weakness they can about Muhammad, ask him a question that only a prophet would know. And the Jews told the Quraysh, ask him about Yusuf, because nobody knows about Yusuf except the Jews and also the Christians. And in Mecca, there weren't many of them, they were all in Medina. So when that happened, at that moment, I read out to you, Alif Lam Ra, here comes the verse that is so beautiful. But more importantly, if you read through the verses, I will break up this the discussion. So I read until verse 30. But the first 3 verses talks about how the Quran is a special document for all of us. The book, it is the verses are clear in this book. And imagine that the translations, Alif Lam Ra, these are the verses of the clear book. This was delivered 8 years only into Islam, and there was no Mus'haf. And already Allah imagined and informed us, you will one day have one whole Al-Quran, and it's clear in Surah Yusuf, it is already projected. And the second one, indeed we have sent down an Arabic Quran that you might understand. So again, Arabic language is a special language. In the 6th century, the predominant language was Persian, it was also Latin, and the Arabs, they were more of a poet. They weren't into recording documents, and yet this is a chance for us to understand that Allah chose Arab because it is a beautiful language, and perhaps we as Muslims need to learn it. And following from that also, it is indeed down as Arabic Quran that you might understand. We relate to you, Ya Muhammad, the best of stories that we have revealed to you of this Quran, although you were before it among the unaware. The story of Yusuf has been there for 4,000 years for us, but for Muhammad it's been there for over 2000 BC when the story began, and Rasulullah was in the 6th century, so about 2,500 years before that times. And of course, only the Jews and the Christians knew about the story. And as you know, there are many versions of Joseph. And here the Quran says, let me tell you the story of Yusuf in a way that you were unaware before. So whatever the stories happened for the past 2,500 years about Joseph, Allah tells us this is the first time you will know what actually happened. And that's a beautiful reminder, because if we realize, even in today, we see many stories, we watch many movies. Like even just a month ago, we were celebrating Indonesian Independence Day. We imagined what it was like for them in 1945 to repel the Japanese invaders. We can only imagine it through movies. And this movie is our favorite, or that movie is our favorite. And yet we don't really know what happened. Here the Quran mentioned that Yusuf is the story that Allah told you. And it's the best way of conveying a story, because the story of Yusuf itself is very, very intense in detail, in which even Christianity could not tell the story in a way that we can tell all our family members. Furthermore, let me also share that it demonstrates that 4,000 years after the actual event, we are still talking about it. We are actually going back in time, because what I mentioned there are verses when Yusuf was inside the cave, Allah said, do not be afraid. Or when the time when Yusuf told his father about the dream, we are there. And this is something that the Jews or the Christians did not have. So it is indeed a miracle. In verse 4, 5, and 6, it states that Yusuf told his father, Father, I have a dream. Indeed, I have seen 11 stars and the sun and the moon all prostrating to me. And his father said, Oh my son, do not relate your vision to your brothers, or they will contrive against you a plan. Indeed, Satan to man is a manifest enemy. Here we see the son, at about 10 years old, telling his father, I had a dream. And then the dream was so beautiful, but the father said, don't tell your brothers. Because if you tell your brothers, we don't know how strong they are. And in fact, he even says, be careful, because Satan will always tell him to do the wrong thing. And the next verse, Yaqub mentioned, and thus will your Lord choose you and teach you the interpretation of narratives and complete his favor upon you and upon the family of Yaqub. and he's completed it upon your fathers before you, Abraham and Isaac. Indeed, your Lord is knowing and wise. So at that time, Yaqub told his son, not only don't tell your brothers, but also you are given this opportunity, and we are proud of you. So from those 3 verses, we can already see the reference of Yusuf showing how a father and a son should be together and to teach each other. And what's frightening here is good news is not always good news, because it says here, don't tell your brothers. The brothers, all those 10 of them, all 11 in fact, they will all go to heaven, it is said. And yet Satan was able to bring fitna into their heart, and the father knew that. Don't tell your brothers, and they will be very, very jealous of you. And he did say Shaitan is the biggest enemy. So from the 3 verses, from verses 3, 4, and 5, 6, we know that whatever we do in life, Satan will always try and attack us. And at that time, even the family of a prophet Ibrahim, Yaqub, and Yusuf, they are not vulnerable. They are not impervious to Satan's trick. And what does it make us? We have to be extra cautious. But one thing I take from this verse, for those who are comfortable with social media, please be mindful. Remember what happened to Yusuf. Good news is not always welcome. We don't know how people might see what you post on your Instagram. It might be positive news, and yet people will still be jealous. So, and there, always remember that Satan will use anything he can to actually mislead us. On the next verses, indeed, we talk about verses 7, 8, and 7, 8, 9, and 10. I want to show you here how this Surah Yusuf is so special. It is the only story that in the Quran is like one whole movie. And there have been many, many movies about Yusuf. And yet in the Quran, if you read it from verse 1 to 111, it is like you are going through time. And it is the best way of telling the story. And here, in that verse, it now talks about the story of the brothers. The 11 brothers, or the 10 brothers in this Surah, because Bunyamin, the youngest, he was always with Yusuf. These 10 brothers, they come from 4 mothers. And I like to highlight when I was reading the Quran, Yusuf said, Ya Abati. And then, Ya Abati means, oh my dearly beloved father. And his father said, Ya Abana, my dearly beloved son. And here, in the Quran, it talks about how the brothers are already jealous. And they even plan to kill Yusuf. And they plan to kill Yusuf so that their father will love them more. What kind of a world at that time can we imagine that the brothers are so jealous that they would actually kill their brothers to be close to their fathers? Maybe today it's illogical, but we don't know what happened 4,000 years ago. And maybe in those times, in fact, if we're familiar with the times of the royalty, there's always competition. One brother wants to kill the other to become the king. So here, we don't know what happened 4,000 years ago, but from the Quran we see how angry they were. And yet the oldest brother said, don't kill him, throw him in the well, and maybe somebody will pick him up. They had that thought. And after that, our father will love us. So this is frightening when ambition and when Satan whispers things into our heart. I have to refer to the Quran in Surah An-Nisa, verse 121. It says there, and Satan will put fantasies in your heart, and you will do crazy things. So don't be surprised that such action is conceivable when Satan is there and when you are not protected. The next verses I want to share, if we call it a movie, the next scene jumps to from verse 11, 12, and 13 and 14, where Yaqub meets the brothers. And they all say, Ya, O father, why do you not entrust us with Joseph while indeed we are to him sincere counselors? Send him with us tomorrow that he may eat well and play. And indeed we will be his guardians. Jacob said, indeed, it saddens me that you should take him. And I fear that a wolf would eat him while you are unaware. And then they replied, if a wolf should eat him while we are a strong clan, indeed we would then be losers. But they lied to their father. Imagine that. Everything they could just to bring out Yusuf so that they could kill him. And we fast forward to verse 15. There in the Quran, we are given knowledge, something that the Christians and the Jews do not know. So when they took him out and agreed to put him in the bottom of the well, we inspired Yusuf. Allah sent a whisper to Yusuf and told Yusuf, you will surely inform them about this affair of theirs while they do not perceive. So again, imagine that as a 10-year-old, you are thrown into the bottom of a well and then a whisper comes to your heart. I can imagine, even today, Yusuf, he's been he was a victim of trafficking, people smuggling, and then he's been abandoned. How could one feel at 10 years old? And so with that, verse 16 to verse 18, and they played this game. Oh, and they came to their fathers at night weeping. They said, "Oh, our fathers, indeed we went racing each other and left Joseph with our possessions, and the wolf ate him. But you would not believe us, even if we were truthful." And they brought upon his shirt faults of blood. So they planned this, and they came to him, and they gave him Yusuf's shirt with whoever's blood. And then there we can see that Yaqub looked at the shirt and realized, in the Quran it says, "Rather your souls have enticed you to do something, so patience is most fitting." Yaqub said, "How can you convince yourself that this is right?" And that's why I repeated several times the verse Sabran Jameel. Sabran Jameel. Sometimes we as parents are confronted with a situation. Our children mean well, but they've done something catastrophic. What do? He knows that Yusuf is gone. So in these 3 verses, again it shows the wisdom of Yaqub, and yet it did foresay that he was in grave sadness after that one. From verses 19, 20, 21 to 22, another scene where at that time Joseph or Yusuf was taken, and there came a company of travelers. Then they sent their water drawer and let down the bucket and said, "Good news, there is a boy." And they concealed him. Taking him as a merchandise. And Allah was knowing of what they did. And they sold him for a reduced price, a few dirhams. And they were concerning of him, of those who were content with little. So he was sold up for a discount. And then one from Egypt who bought him said to his wife, "Make his residence comfortable. Perhaps he will benefit us. We will adopt him as a son." And thus we established Yusuf in the land that we might teach him interpretation of events. And Allah is predominant over his affairs, but most of all, people did not know. And from verse 22, "And when Joseph reached maturity, we gave him judgment and knowledge, and thus we reward the doers of good." That whole scene, we jump from him being smuggled, being trafficked, being sold as a slave, and even at that time, the people that bought him, Allah protected Yusuf, put him in the best of places in Egypt, and then he was brought up the best way until he became a young man, and he became reached his manhood. So the message from those 3 verses, that was a time of 10 to 12 years that has passed by. And yet the Quran can tell that story in 3 verses. If you read the Bible, they have a different kind of scenario, a long story, in which at the end, this tells us the main essence of the story. From verse 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, it talks of the tale of the wife of the Potiphar. In the Bible, it's called the Potiphar. In the Quran, he's the servant of Aziz. But and again, in the beauty of the Quran, this is not the era of Fir'aun, this is the era of Hyksos. So it's called the king of Egypt, not the Fir'aun of Egypt. And yet in that verse 23, it begins a tale of what everyone knows about Yusuf, the story of Zulaykha and Yusuf. And she, in whose house he was, sought to seduce him. She closed the doors and said, "Haytalak, come to me." And Yusuf said, "Ma'adallah, I seek refuge of Allah. Indeed, he is my master who has made good my residence. Indeed, wrongdoers will not succeed." And she certainly determined to seduce him, and he would have inclined to her had he not seen the proof of his Lord. This is another beautiful story. Rabbihi burhana rabbi. So anhu li nafsri, fakadalika rabbihi burhana rabbi. And if Yusuf did not see the sign of Allah, he would have surely been enticed by that woman. Indeed, it says here, "And thus it was what we should avert from him evil and immorality. Indeed, he was our chosen servant." And they both raised the door, and she tore his shirt from the back, and they found her husband at the door. And she said, "What is the recompense of one who intended evil for your wife, but that he be imprisoned for a painful punishment?" So first she said, "Hi talak," and then she chases him. And then suddenly the door opens and her husband is there. And she shouts, "He did it." She shouts, "What will you punish this man who tried to harm your family?" And indeed, when you see that, how would you feel? You were abandoned by your brothers. You were thrown into a well. You were trafficked, you were enslaved, and now you thought you were doing good, and yet that person still abused you. Joseph said, "It was she who sought to seduce me," and a witness from her family testified, "If his shirt is torn from the front, then she has told the truth, and he is of the liar. But if his shirt is torn from the back, then she has lied, and he is of the truthful." So when her husband saw his shirt torn from the back, he said, "Indeed, it is of the women's plan. Indeed, your plan is great." So she knew that his wife was unable to contain herself, and she did such harm. And furthermore, he told Joseph, "Ignore this." And he told his wife, "Ask for forgiveness for your sins. Indeed, you were the sinful." My brothers, that is a quick review of Surah Yusuf, and you can imagine how that would be if we were to watch it to a movie today. But imagine that we went back in time 4,000 years to see what actually happened. And the notes that I took from here in those 4 verses, she said, "Haytama," and he said, "Ma'adallah." And وَحَمَّا بِهَا لَوْلَا أَبْرَآ بِحَانَ رَبِّهِ. And that is something, he almost felt her, and almost showed him a sign. And some may say that when she was about to seduce him, she covered one of the statues that she worshipped. And he asked, "Why are you covering that statue?" And she said, "I don't want my gods to witness me doing what I'm doing." And there Yusuf said, "You are afraid of a statue. Allah is watching us." And that's, some might say, what the word Subhanallah means. So for all of you, should you be in a situation where you are enticed, remember Yusuf, he almost failed, but Allah gave him a sign to watch. My brothers, the time is approaching Maghrib. I purposely did not read the last 5 verses, but let me just summarize. In essence, when that was the judgment of the Aziz, unfortunately, in the city of that city at that time, the great wives of those politicians found out. The wife of Al-Aziz is seeking to seduce her slave boy. He has impassioned her with love. Indeed, we see her in clear error. And of course, when these politics happen, she must respond. So when she heard of their scheming, she sent for them and prepared for them a banquet and gave each one of them a knife and said, "Come out before them, Joseph." And when they saw him, they greatly admired him. And those women cut their hands and said, "Indeed, perfect is Allah. This is not a man. This is none but a noble angel." And Zulayha, or the wife, said, "That is the one about whom you blamed me. And I certainly sought to seduce him, but he firmly refused. And if he will not do what I order him, he will surely be in prison and will be those debased." And there again, our beloved Yusuf prayed to Allah, "Ya Allah, my Lord, prison is more to my liking than that to which they invite me. And if you do not avert from me their plan, I might incline toward them and thus be one of the ignorant." And so his Lord responded to him and averted from him their plan. Indeed, he is the hearing, he is the knowing. Then it appeared to them, after they had seen the sign, Al-Aziz should surely imprison him for a time. So in the last 5 verses, again he was given the difficult test, that not only did he survive the wife of Potiphar, the other women wanted to take advantage of him. And he even said, "I'd rather be in prison than be in the situation." And Allah gave him prison. What does that teach you? Would you rather go to prison, or would you just say, "Ya Allah, please let me escape from this situation"? Some say he should have said escape, but some other Mufassir said, "You are in the middle of Egypt, there is no way for you to escape. The best place for you to be is in prison." But of course, this is from the Surah Al-Quran. It comes down from Allah, and everything that happened is already been planned by Him. So, not that I encourage you to be, if you're in trouble, don't say, "Please take me to prison." But of course, there you can say, "Please, Ya Allah, please protect me." But again, the points that I got from those 5 verses, when women talk, it becomes a trending topic. You cannot escape it. Be careful of that. And it is set up by that woman. It is a potential abuse, and even this is how he had to be saved and to go to prison. So, if I took this into a movie, that's probably the first movie. And it's a beautiful story for us to truly appreciate as Muslims. But what do we take away from that? And as I conclude, let me give you some summary of that discussion, of that beautiful verse. For me as a diplomat, I see the geopolitics. From a child to a slave to becoming a prime minister. If you complete the verse until 111, you will see that he becomes a prime minister. You will see that he summons his brothers, and you will see that he will be the savior of Egypt. And again, the savior of Egypt in the 18th century. But At that time, when he invited all of his brothers, he brought the 10 brothers, the 11 brothers, and in 400 years they became a great community. But unfortunately, Egypt was given back to the Egyptians, not the Hyksos. And in the 16th century, that's when Moses came, and he brought the great exodus out of Egypt. And in the Quran, it even says the Fir'aun will be placed in a casing where all civilization can see what we do to those dictators. But it is interesting that from 2000 BC, we learn about Joseph, and in the 1600 BC, we see how what Joseph has done has been overruled by Allah, because it is a necessary part of history. From this surah, there's also a lot of parenting and ibadah for youths, how we see the closest to the father, the word Sabran Jamil, we see the relationship with the brothers, and yet Allah forgave them. And in the other part of the Surah Yusuf, you see how Yusuf is protected with his brother Bunyamin, and we see how Yusuf, no matter how difficult it is, he was always faithful in Allah, and Allah loved him very much. Allah always defended him. The key words I always want to remember: Ma'adallah, lawla burhana Rabbi. And of course here it demonstrates that zina will always be a challenge, and if Allah protects us, inshallah we'll be protected. In the area of governance, I also want to summarize that here you see that Yusuf was a competent, strong authority, and before he was called to become the prime minister, he demanded that all of his crimes be absolved. Has everybody accepted the verdict? And there, the women and the wife of the Potiphar said he is innocent. He also conducted management by walking around. He was entrusted by the Potiphar so that he can take care of his household. And of course, Allah gave the strength for Yusuf to understand dreams. Today, if we have dreams, we ponder and ask our wives, or even hope to, if it's a good dream, we are happy. If it's a bad dream, we sadaqah, or we spit to our left 3 times. And yet, it is something that it is a way that Allah communicates to His beloved Hamba. And finally, professionalism, ma'adallah. Again, when we as men are faced with such a situation, can we truly say today that we are reminded by Allah? But maybe from this surah, it should remind us men that no matter if the forces demand us to do some bad actions, we must always remember that in the Yawm al-Akhirah, Yawm al-Ba'ath, in Akhirah later, everything will be accountable. We cannot escape what we have done, and so we better spend our time begging for forgiveness from Allah. Other matters and the verse here I want to underline is that here the role of shaitan is clear. His father said, be careful of shaitan. Shaitan attacked the brother's heart, made them jealous. Shaitan made those people that picked him up and sold him for pennies. Shaitan also made Yusuf to become a victim of slavery. And when the Prophet bought him, he had little intention to make him a son, and yet his wife could not hold herself back. Shaitan tricked her. And again, and when that happened, Shaitan tricked the Potiphar, her husband, let them be free. And he asked Yusuf, please forget this ever happened. And again, Shaitan tricked the women of Egypt at that time. They tried to seduce him. And finally, Shaitan also tricked the person who was in jail, because when in the second part of the story, Yusuf went to met 2 people in jail, and then he gave them the story of their dreams, and one of them were released, and he asked that person, please tell the Potiphar of me if he should need a dream reader. He forgot to mention that, and it took him 7 years before they realized that he could be freed. And so those are the verses that I want to share with you, my brothers, my dearly beloved sisters. It is probably a quick skim through how I see the story of Yusuf, Surah Yusuf. I believe that this surah is such worthy for memorization, and especially for us men. Yusuf is not only the story of the wife chasing him, but it is an entire biography of what kind of a good Muslim you can be. And the Quran says it in such a beautiful way that inshallah from what we learn from him and from the Quran, we'll become wiser. And finally, coming back, when the surah was brought down in the 6th century, in a time when before Hijrah, and perhaps not long during the times of Isra Mi'raj, can you imagine that Allah had to bring down this verse in one whole one whole reading, not like Al-Baqarah or like Surah Yasin or Surah Nuh, Surah Ibrahim, or all those other verses. Even the story of Moses is located in various chapters, but here Surah Yusuf is one story for us to contemplate and ponder upon. Inshallah, I hope this is helpful to all of us. I seek refuge from Allah for the mistake that I have conveyed. Anything that I convey to you that is of worth, indeed is from Allah. And should I have made mistakes, I take forgiveness from Allah. Indeed, shaitan is never yielding in trying to make us misdirected. Alhamdulillah.
MashaAllah, so what a beautiful summary for the slides, right? So without further ado, I'd like to open this discussion to the floor from the brothers and sisters. I'd like to have a question. We have about 10 minutes before Maghrib prayer time, inshallah. So, please, sir. Apa? Baik.
Thank you, Bapak. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam.
First of all, I would like to thank you for an excellent presentation and also an excellent recitation of the Quran. So, we're really proud of you because our leader really have been studying his own religion and bring this religion to be an embodiment of his conduct in his daily life. And hopefully you're going to be give us a spirit and energy.
Inshallah.
I mean, and also in all the territory under your jurisdiction in southern U.S. from New Mexico to Florida. So it is also really can be an example for our youth especially. Erdogan, is a leader how that he can also read the Quran frequently and read his country to be the better from this and stuff. And hopefully it will be the same with you.
Inshallah, Amin.
From this Surah Yusuf is a very, very good surah, and I believe we can take that there is 3 points very important, the essence of the Surah Yusuf. First of all, how can we overcome the challenges of the sexual temptation, especially coming from the beautiful such woman and from the high hierarchy. But I don't know how this one, whether we know that Allah gave the sign to Yusuf to remind him to be careful about this temptation. So how is happening, for instance, it's happening to our youth, for instance. Most likely maybe they do not have received the sign from Allah saying be careful of this temptation of the woman. And the second one is in our siblings, we expect something good coming from our siblings, but instead they betray us. But what should we do? We do have to, what's the best that we can do? But Allah said, just forgive them. Yeah, forgive them. It's not easy, well, easy to say, but it's not easy to do it. So this one also is very good point for us. How can we also forgive? Because forgive and forget is the best for us. And the third one is in our life, we always have the challenges. And especially in the event of the 9/11. Tomorrow will be the 20th anniversary of 9/11. We Muslims in North America very have challenges. Some of, especially for us who are activists doing da'wah in this country, a lot of our brothers have been detained and been deported and been controlled by all the government agencies. But at the time, what we have to do is we keep going on that one and do the best what we can do, be a good example to the nation that we the Muslims can contribute and contributing citizens inshallah.
Subhanallah. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Please. Please, if you have other discussions, I'd love to hear your views. Almost Maghrib? 4:40. Yeah.
3 more minutes. 5 more minutes.
5 more minutes. If in that case, I'm sure we can continue our discussions after Maghrib. But one thing, thank you, Brother Dharma Bohan. When I was the president's interpreter, I sat next to Erdogan, and he was also the prime minister, and he was very passionate. He was in Islamabad, and in front of me was Ahmadinejad, Iran, and of course next to me was Egypt, Brother Meki. At the time he wasn't overthrown, and of course there we tried to bring peace. Unfortunately, this D8 meeting, you talk about the brothers, and yet sometimes culture overrules. Inshallah, we'll be given the strength, but I think that's what Yusuf, if we all read it over and over again, we'll find many gems, not only for the brotherhood, but also for siblings, that at the end of the day, even a brother that tried to kill you, Allah says there, Yaqub said, beware of shaitan. Inshallah, we'll be given strength. But I do appreciate your comments. I hope that our brothers here, my younger brother, I hope we will all have a passion and love for Quran. I know I'm not that young, but how lucky, if I was like you, brother, you can speak Arabic, you can learn the Quran and memorize it, but I think many of us here are undergraduates, masters, postgraduates. The Quran is not something that we leave to the elder or the ulama. I think Texas has demonstrated. Brothers in, my young brother Fadli at Ifdal in Dallas, they're Hafiz. I think in Houston we can also do that. So please, the reason I read 10 minutes is so that you know that the Quran is going to be is so important to us. Finally, tomorrow, 20 years of Afghanistan, my brothers, also the beautiful Surah Yusuf, the geopolitics. At that time, Yusuf did not convert Egypt into a Muslim nation, and yet they trusted him. But 400 years later, the Egyptians abused the Bani Israel. Do you see any correlations? 4,000 years, 2,000 years ago, even today in Afghanistan, 20 years, we see our brothers there in such a situation. It is the reality. And has Shaitan whispered to all of us that we will let these things happen? Is it possible that if we look at the history, Afghanistan was so important in 1981. They defeated the Soviet. And yet what happened afterwards? Angry people came up. And this could be the reality not only for the fact that the world is becoming less divided between the freedom of expression and the traditionalists. But the reality is, you cannot escape anything. When Allah decrees something, no matter how powerful you are, He'll bring you to your feet. And no matter how powerful you are, you may not be able to control a community, a nation, with all your technology. And perhaps, inshallah, we will learn as much as we are heartbroken to see our brothers. But when you step back and see, look at that. The most powerful nation like Egypt at that time, still Allah decided something else, and the outcome is unexpected. Tomorrow is 20 years. We will continue seeing what happened in the next 20 years. What will the world be like? This is where Indonesia plays a critical role, Pak. We believe in the voice of reason. We believe in coming together. We believe that we must promote Islam, rahmatan lil alameen. We all do that. But when you see angry people in front of us, be them Muslims or non-Muslims, how will we react? And I think we can learn also from Yusuf. No matter how wrong they are, how evil they are, he was still patient to Allah. And he says, Ma'ad Allah. And he said Ma'ad Allah when that woman tried to take him. And he said Ma'ad Allah when he was a prime minister and said, I cannot free this person because I cannot break the national or the legislation. So those are my brief thoughts. Inshallah, Pa Eka, Pa Dharma, my very beloved brothers and sisters also. If you have any comments, please convey. I know that Zulaikha is not the bad person, it's always shaitan. But at the end of the day, we must always remember that what do we learn from this story? The story is that Allah will always be with you, shaitan will always abuse you, and no matter how powerful a nation is, Allah will always be your protector, and we must always be ready for your muba'ats and Jannah. With that, Paika, shall we prepare for a Maghrib prayer or do you have suggestions? Thank you.
Well, we're about 2-3 minutes away from Maghrib time, so let's conclude this one. So maybe Andrew would like to lead the dua, closing dua, inshallah.
Alhamdulillah. Thank you, brother. Thank you, brother. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. Wa salatu wa salam ala ashrafil anbiya'i wal mursalin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Allahumma ighfir lil muslimina wal muslimat wal mu'minina wal mu'minat al-ahya'i minhum wal amwat innaka ala kulli shay'in qadir. Allahumma inna nas'aluka salamatan fid din wa 'afiyatan fil jasad wa ziyadatan fil 'ilmi wa barakatan fil rizqi wa tawbatan qabla al-maut wa rahmatan inda al-maut wa maghfiratan ba'da al-maut. اللهم حول علينا في شكرات الموت والنجاة من النار والعفو عند الحساب. ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب. ربنا ظلمنا أنفسنا وإن لم تغفر لنا وترحمنا لنكونن من الخاسرين. ربنا لا تؤاخذنا إن نسينا أو أخطأنا. ربنا ولا تحمل علينا إصرا كما حملته على الذين من قبلنا. ربنا ولا تحملنا ما لا طاقة لنا به واعف عنا واغفر لنا وارحمنا أنت مولانا فانصرنا على القوم الكافرين. رب اغفر لي ولوالدي وارحمهما كما ربونا صغارا. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. Thank you, sir.
This concludes our program today. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Wa alaikum.